May 18, 1944. Purvis Bay, Florida Island. 22:40 hours. The night is a soft darkness stitched with anchor lights. Coconut palms hold their breath. A breeze slips along mooring lines and finds a ship's bell on a destroyer Escort, making it tremble once without sound. In the shallow water near the beach, bioluminescence smears under the bump of a skiff. On the stern of a Buckley-class hull, a young sailor leans against the lifeline and listens to a noise that will soon own his days. A crisp, metallic knock that rises up the forward bulkheads and into his bones. Sonar's pulse, returning through a hull like a heartbeat. In a few hours, the sun will lay a pale bar on the eastern horizon. The ship will stand out past the reef and find rougher water. The sound, that clean, regular ping, will keep time with intention, the metronome of a hunt about to begin. This is where the story of a modest ship begins to press itself into the record. In late spring 1944, the Pacific is no longer a map of isolated dangers and improvised courage. It is a system. From airfields in the Solomons to code rooms in Pearl Harbor, the Allies have learned not only to fight, but to organize the fight. That organization will bring a destroyer Escort named for a 20-year-old ensign, lost in the first hour of war, to a narrow seam of time and space in which 6 enemy submarines are waiting, unaware that their positions exist not as secrets, but as sums already solved. The United States Navy did not arrive at this point by accident. It arrived through patience flensed of romance. Years earlier, a handful of officers and civilians worked in rooms that smelled of oiled fans and hot paper, where IBM tabulators clicked and stopped, turning traffic into meaning. The Japanese Navy's main operational code, JN-25, was not a wall, it was a hill, and men and women in Washington and Pearl Harbor climbed it day by day. Out of Station Hypo and its successor at Pearl, Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, FRUPAC, came the kind of knowledge that leaves no trace but a delayed radio message, a plotted grid, an order that seems from the outside like intuition. By May 1944, that knowledge has grown into a habit of mind. On May 13th, a transmission slips out into the ether. It is routine. A submarine, later identified as I-16, declares where she expects to be at a particular hour off Bougainville. It is to the right ears an address. With the message comes a broader shape. The Japanese 6th Fleet is laying a picket line across a corridor the Americans will use. 7 submarines extend themselves across the ocean between the Admiralty Islands and Truk, a thin tripwire called the NA line. Their orders are clear: remain on station, report what you see. It is an answer made in the image of a Navy that once moved with certainty. But by 1944, the weather has changed. The picket line's very tidiness is a flaw that an enemy who reads your mail can measure and exploit. From FRUPAC, the decoded positions of these submarines run across circuits to Tulagi. Commander Hamilton H. Haynes, who had learned what coordination at sea could do in the Atlantic, now commands a division of destroyer escorts in the Solomons. He forms a group intended to function not as 3 ships, but as a machine with 3 moving parts. USS George, DE 697, USS Raby, DE 698, USS England, DE 635. 3 Buckley-class escorts, diesel-electric hearts under their decks, hulls pinched and lean, only weeks or months out of the yards. A small ritual is done for each vessel before the great one begins. The names are not decoration, they are continuity. George for a seaman who stayed at his gun, Raby for an admiral who shepherded convoys. England for Ensign John Charles England, who returned to the capsizing hull of USS Oklahoma again and again to lead men out. If you run a hand along a rail, the paint is still new. There is a weapon mounted forward on each of these ships that looks like a statement of purpose. 24 spigots jut upward at slanting angles, projectors arranged in 6 rows of 4. When loaded, the heads of the projectiles give the frame a bristling look that earned it an English nickname, Hedgehog. It is small only if you compare it to the old way. Each projectile weighs roughly 65 pounds. 35 pounds of that is explosive. Fired in a sequenced ripple, the 24 fall into the sea ahead of the ship and sink in a pattern, and an ellipse about 140 by 120 feet across. There is no timer. They do not explode unless they find something hard. If they miss, the sea keeps its voice. The sonar continues to ping, and a human can make a new calculation and try again. To understand why this matters, remember the old method. Depth charges were acts of faith and noise. They detonated at best guess depths, blanking out sonar. With a Hedgehog, the attack is either a touch or silence. Instead of blinding, the attempt sharpens hearing. May 19th, 1944. North of Bougainville, afternoon light goes hard on the waves as England's sonar paints a return that feels like a knuckle wrapped on a door. At 13:35, the operator calls the range. Beneath that water, I-16 dives and turns and tries the habits that have worked before. She is a Type C-1, a long-legged boat that once carried a midget submarine to Pearl Harbor. She is also today a cargo ship under the sea. Bags of rice stacked where torpedoes once were, sea being the only road left to a starving garrison at Bouin. England's first 3 Hedgehog runs miss, though one projectile hits, bruising the hull. The 4th run misses. The 5th finds its geometry. At 14:35, arcs of water rise, and a deep underwater concussion lifts England's stern clear of the ocean. After the shock comes the rest of the story: bags bulging with rice, fragments of wooden cork, and oil ribbons impatient spread. I-16 goes down with her captain and 106 others. The picket line remains. Its logic has not changed. Its odds have. 3 days later, before dawn on May 22nd, George's radar sees a line where there should be none. ARO 106 crash dives. George misses. At 4:25, England regains contact, puts the ellipse where turning cannot take it away, and 3 Hedgehog warheads touch the hull. Time narrows. Dawn after dawn finds the same work. May 23rd at 6:04, a patrol plane declares a sighting. Raby attacks and misses. George misses 5 times. At 8:19, England's team, having listened as carefully as men can under strain, writes the pattern at last. The second salvo falls as if it had always known where to go, between 10 and 12 hits. Someone later will write breaking up noises, a phrase so mild it hides all human meaning, and then there is oil. On May 24th, radar reads a skin echo at 17,000 yards. It belongs to RO 116, newly commissioned. She dives late and deep. England takes her turn. Twice the firing sequence is broken off when the solution moves underfoot. On the 3rd, the line and range and drift align. 3 exploders do their work. 2 days later, May 26th, RO 108 is found just before midnight. Raby's first attack misses. At 23:23, England fires and lands multiple hits. The sea takes the details. If this sequence feels like repetition, that is because war at its most efficient reduces brilliance to procedure. Between attacks, the 3 escorts take the practical pilgrimage any hunter must undertake: into Seidler Harbor at Marianas for Hedgehog rounds and stores, back out to sea where position is nothing and function is everything. The last in the line to be found will not give up easily. RO 105, with a division commander aboard, becomes a lesson in endurance. Late on the last day of May, a contact is made. The submarine plunges. Hours become pieces of minutes as ship after ship takes a turn. Hazelwood drops depth charges. George runs patterns and may land 3 hits. The boat still maneuvers. A veil of oil spreads. As dawn arrives, Spangler misses. England patient, takes the last card. There is a feeling aboard a ship when the solution is right. At 7:36, England fires. The explosions are not polite. They are the end of all arguments. 6 to 10 contacts, then secondaries as torpedoes cook off. The column that lifts is so large it writes itself on memory from miles away. When the oil sheet spreads, it is not dark. It is a metallic play of colors. RO10. Five's crew learn nothing further. Strip this sequence of poetry, and what remains are numbers that the historian cannot resist. 6 submarines in 12 days. 5 killed by a single ship's Hedgehog salvos. No other warship in any navy in any conflict before or since will write a line like that into history. When the news finally reaches Washington, a sentence appears that has often been remembered because it speaks cleanly to the heart. There'll always be an England in the United States Navy, signed by Admiral Ernest J. King. It earns its life not because of its lyricism, but because it attaches itself to the kind of record a service wants to teach its children. To say this grew out of one captain's judgment is to deny the network that made it possible. From FRUPAC, the information moved like a well-oiled hinge. The decision to pass target coordinates to ships at sea was a gamble, weighed by men who understood that if the Japanese suspected their JN-25 traffic was being read, they would shift ciphers and evaporate a war-winning advantage. From the other side, expectation turns into a kind of tragedy. The Japanese submarines sent to form the NA line carried with them doctrines formed in better years. Their officers expected to perform the lonely, exacting work of picket duty. They expected, if attacked, to face the storm of an older age. Depth charges whose timing could be gamed. Sonar that could be blinded by noise and bubbles. Ship captains confused into making a wrong judgment. They were met instead by an attack that did not sound like an attack, that gave no warning until metal met metal. The RO-100 class submarines were competent boats for coastlines. 760 tons, 4 tubes forward. They carried radar detectors, but not their own radar, and so were blind unless their lookouts saw what the world of 1944 made progressively harder to see. Their assignment to fixed coordinates removed from their captains the right to think about tomorrow. This efficiency is not simply the product of a fine weapon and a decrypted code. It is the child of training and a culture of improvement that treats drills as rehearsal for mercy. The sonar ping is the symbol that deserves to survive. It is a democratic sound, the same in every ship, the same in the ears of every operator. It is an artifact of a philosophy that clarity is a better shield than bravado, that routine is not a prison, but a promise. Hear it in the long night when the bridge watch shivers. Hear it after a missed salvo when silence tempers the next try. Between May 19th and May 31st, 1944, in water warm to the hand and deadly to a man unaided, a destroyer Escort did a thing that admits no real precedent. The event lives because it compresses so many truths, that intelligence not shared is vanity, that a humble weapon used well outperforms a heavy weapon used dramatically. The training is kindness. In the end, the USS England moved through 12 days as if on rails, drawn not by fate but by procedure, and left behind an obligation to remember that protection, done properly, is not spectacle but rhythm. And in that rhythm, there is a kind of freedom that is never loud but always enough.